I just want to say a big welcome to everyone again. It's a pleasure to see you all, and especially during these last few nights of Ramadan. Um, let's do 60 more seconds, and then we'll jump right in, inshallah. And looking forward to tonight very much. We're gonna try to get to the thrilling conclusion of our story. Bismillah. All right. Inshallah, let's make a start. It's 6:45 Eastern Standard Time. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Sayyiduna wa maulana wa habibina wa shafi'ina Muhammad Sadiq al-Amin. Rahmatul lil Alameen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure and an honor to see you here tonight at the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton's Sunday night Ramadan program. For all of us, the days have been getting longer, of course, and so I hope you'll forgive the slightly delayed start to tonight's program. I'm really excited about tonight because inshallah I'm looking forward in a few moments to completing the story of Sheikh Sanaan with you, but also for us to look forward into the text, into Attar's the full arc of Attar's Conference of the Birds, so that we can begin to understand the ultimate point that he's trying to make. And I think that's really important for us, particularly during these last 10 nights, because what I'm hoping to do in the next 45 or 50 minutes or so is for us to connect this back to the journey that all of us are on. So if I'd like you to keep something in mind as we delve back in to this narrative, into this important allegory and metaphor parable, I'd like us to keep in mind this connection. How does this all connect to the journey that we're on now and to the work of improving ourselves in order to achieve closeness to and love for and love from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's jump right back in and let's recap for a moment where we're at in terms of our narrative. I'm gonna spotlight my video, and I hope all of you can see my screen. And if there's any issues at any time, please just drop a note into the chat, and inshallah khair, we can address it as we're going along. Bismillah. So there's 5 real themes that I want us to keep in mind this week, and they mirror some of the themes that we've been discussing over the last few weeks. We've gotten to the point in our story where the birds have agreed. The birds have together overcome the first major obstacle to this journey that will take them to the greatest of the birds, the great Simorg. And when they go to the Simorg, what they are seeking is unity and a teacher who will unite their hearts so that they may truly approach the divine. They may truly approach their creator. And in order to get to the Simorg, the Hoopoe, the Hudhud, their leader, who is elected by them to be their leader, is warning them and preparing them for what is going to be a difficult journey. And in the very first moments of them beginning to set out, and when I say that, they're just beginning to set out, we come to the story, this parable of Sheikh Sanaan and his passionate love for this young Christian woman. And where we have gotten to in the story is that Sheikh Sanaan has been consumed by love, by passion, by emotion. and that he has given everything of himself away. He has given everything of himself away, including his faith, in order to achieve and seek this love. And last week, Attar, through the character of the Hoopoe, reminds us that we might look upon Sheikh Sanan with judgment, that we might look upon him and say, look at this old man who's given into his emotions, who's given into his passions, who's given into his lusts, who's loved in a way that a man of his stature should not love. And yet we are reminded of the swineherds in our own heart, that we are reminded that all of us are tending after lusts and passions which take us away from God, that each and every one of us is contending with our egos, our arrogance, our jealousies, our greeds, our avarice, our hatreds, that we're all contending with these things all the time. So don't be so quick to judge. And where we left the story last week was the disciples, his 400 disciples who have traveled with him to Rome. They've traveled with him to Rome, and they are saying to him, Ya Sheikh, let us stay with you. Let us stay with you. We will become like you. We'll become with you. And he says, no, go. Don't debase yourself as I have been debased. And so he sends them away, and they go away. Because really, they didn't want to go to that next level. They said with their tongues that they wanted to be with the Sheikh, and they wanted to experience this difficult time with him and be with him through it and all those things, but they weren't ready to do that. And so as the disciples now return back to Mecca, I want us to keep these 5 themes in mind. 1, love, love, love. Keep in mind love. Love is overflowing in the Conference of the Birds, but love is overflowing in this story. There are many kinds of love here. There's a love for God. There's a love for another human being. But we are going to be introduced to another kind of love and intimacy in a moment. 2, and connected, is companionship, sohba or sohbat, and intimacy, uns. Companionship and intimacy. Because this story is full of companionship and intimacy. The Sheikh Sanan wants the companionship and indeed the intimacy of this beautiful, pious, spiritual Christian woman. And yet at the same time, there's other forms of intimacy here as well. How do we become intimate with our own hearts and souls? How has the Sheikh, through this breaking apart, this challenge to his faith and to everything he is, that he becomes more intimately aware of his own soul and him and of himself? 3, there's the trauma in wayfaring. We talked about this the first week. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran, do you think you'll believe and you won't be tested? That we'll be tested through our companions and through our children and through our wealth. That the very act of wayfaring, the very act of journeying to Allah is going to be full of trauma and difficulty. 4, what's it all about, my friends? What's it all about? Why are we engaged in this? Because we're seeking the beloved. We're seeking the source of all of these emotions and passions, and we're seeking the pure source from where all of these come. We're seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're seeking God. And God is referred to in this text as the beloved constantly. That what we are experiencing here in this book is a journey to not merely the divine, a word which says to us God, not merely the divine, but there's an attribute that is attached, and Attar very purposefully attaches to the divine, which is the notion of beloved. And we come back to the idea of love. And then finally, we want to continue asking ourselves in the back of our minds this question. When was God ever absent that he had to be sought out? When was God ever absent that we had to seek God out? It's an important question. Let's get back into the story. So the Sheikh's followers leave Rum. They leave the Sheikh tending the swineherd. And back in Mecca, cracked by shame, his followers hid in their own little corners, says the text. But the Sheikh, and this is important, the Sheikh had one faithful friend in Mecca, the 401st disciple, so to speak, who had not accompanied them to Rome. He was a wise man of great eminence, and in fact he was the sincerest of them all. When he saw his friends return without the Sheikh, he asked what had become of their master. They recounted all that had come to pass, how fate had piled misfortune on the ancient man, and what the divine had decreed for the Sheikh. And just like people telling a story, and I think this next part is so interesting because Attar so captures so well our human emotion that when we see something tragic and terrible befall someone, there is a kind of relish, isn't there, that we have in retelling that story, in telling that story to those who may not know it. And so what did the disciples say? They say a Christian girl's hair ensnared him and blocked the path of his faith. He now makes love to her locks and her beauty spot. His dervish robe is burned into ash. He is a changed man. He has withdrawn from all our faith's commandments and is now herding swine. The grieving Holy One has wrapped the belt of idolatry tightly around his waist 4 times. It is true that our Sheikh was the wisest of all in matters of faith, but now he is no different from a pagan. There's a bit of masala there, isn't there? There's a bit of masala. There's a bit of spice. They're telling the story. They're lamenting over the story. They've all experienced the story, the 400 disciples, and now they're conveying it to the one who remained. But listen to the response of the one who remained. And we're at this point in the story where the followers abandon their master and return. The Sheikh's wise friend listened to this account in astonishment. His face turned yellow and he began to weep. And what did he say? "You lewd scoundrels," he said. "When it comes to loyalty, you are neither men nor women. This is the time when a soul needs 1,000 friends. If you were indeed true friends to our Sheikh, why did you not behave like friends? Shame on you. You call yourself his disciples? Is this how you pay your dues and show your loyalty? Shame on you. When our Sheikh donned the zonar, the cloak of the Christian, you should have all done the same. You should not have deserted him. Christianity ought to have been for you all. There was no camaraderie or consistency in your actions. You're all hypocrites. When you offer your friendship, you must offer it with sincerity, even at the cost of giving up what's dear to you. When you prosper, your friends number 100,000. But when you are weak and in need, that's when true friends distinguish themselves. Isn't that the truth, my friends? When you prosper, your friends number 100,000. But when you are weak and in need, that's when your true friends distinguish themselves. When the Sheikh fell into the jaws of a crocodile, you all ran for fear of infamy. Not only were you afraid of the crocodile, he's saying that's not only the problem. That's not the only problem. But you ran from infamy. You ran from the fear that you would be tainted by the scandal of the Sheikh's actions. But love's foundation is infamy. Whoever shies away from it is unschooled, green, and crass in heart and head. What a powerful statement from the one disciple, the true student of the Sheikh. You know, this is, in some ways, you know, I read this every time, and it turns a mirror onto us. It turns a mirror onto me. What is the value of friendship? And why, in so many ways, has the word friend or the term friendship become such an easy word? Maybe in the age of Facebook and thousands of friends and friend requests and friend acceptances and followers, that these words have started to take on a different hue, a different meaning. But the friendship that is being spoken about here is a profound friendship, as profound as romance, as profound as passionate love, as profound as the connection between parent and child. This is another profound kind of friendship. And of course, all of those other amazing loves, all those other amazing relationships that we experience are deepened through the act of true friendship. How many people are married to each other for decades, but are never truly friends? How many people enjoy the acquaintance of someone, but are never truly friends? How often does life throw difficulty on our path where parent and child just remain parent and child and never reach that level of friendship? Friendship is a maqam, is a station. And that's what is being talked about here. When our friendship is challenged, by circumstance, by ethics, by morality, what do? Do we stand in judgment? Do we withdraw because we can't bear to be tainted with this? It's a question I ask myself as I read this. And it's a difficult question, because we know that there are times where we give up on certain friendships because they're toxic, because they're hurtful. Were there friendships to begin with? I wonder. But then there are others, and I think we know those moments in our lives where we've had good friendships and they meet a particular snag, that we reach a particular obstacle with them. And why does that friendship fall apart? Why do we leave it? Why do we abandon it? The Sheikh student here is telling us no. He's not saying accept it with your heart, the faith of another. He's too wise for that. He's saying that be in the company of, be in the presence of, behave like. So at least you stand and the person knows that you're willing to go to the ends of the earth for them. That's a friendship. That's a love. Love one another. The Prophet ﷺ instructed us, the Prophet Muhammad instructed us, love one another. And express your love for one another. Express your love for one another. Express it. Say it. In deed and in word. So how did the disciples respond? Well, they say, look, everything you now say to us, we also said to the Shaykh. We even resolved to share his sorrows and joy, to sell our piety and disgrace ourselves, to jettison our religion, to bow down before idols. But the Shaykh thought it best that we swiftly depart. He saw no use in our camaraderie and turned us back towards home. We came back by his command. Truly, we have told you the whole story, and we've told nothing back. The disciples are feeling like they're feeling on the defensive here, aren't they? They're feeling like, hold on here. You weren't there. We were there. We saw what was going on. And frankly, we did the best that we could. And now the faithful friend, the one who stayed in Mecca, speaks again. And this is in some ways is the it pierces us. It pierces us. The faithful friend spoke again and said, were you true wayfarers on the path? Were you true wayfarers of the path, you would have stationed yourself at the door of the Almighty and kept vigil and competed with one another in begging that great one to show grace to your sheikh and return him to you. When you abandoned your sheikh, why did you come to Mecca instead of going straight to the Almighty's door? Allahu Akbar. Why did you come to Mecca instead of going straight to the Almighty's door? My dear brothers, my dear sisters, and this is going to come up again. When was Allah ever absent? When was God ever absent? God isn't in Mecca. They didn't have to come back to Mecca to pray for their sheikh. The sincerity of prayer is wherever one finds oneself. And if we love someone, we care for someone, we are in companionship with someone, and they are in distress, we start knocking right away. Because the rahmah of God is close, the mercy of God is close, the grace of God is close, the compassion of God is close, and we are their vessels, endowed and gifted with the power and the agency to knock on that door. Why didn't they knock on the door? How flimsy was their faith? How brittle was their faith that they didn't turn to God and keep vigil, competing with one another and begging the Great One to show grace. At this point, the disciples heard this and they hung their heads in shame. The wise friend then said, "What use is this disgrace? What has happened, like a true master." And now we are learning again who the masters are in the story, who the guides are, who the teachers are. What has happened has happened. Let's rise up and hurry to our master's aid. Let us put on our plaintiff's garments and go to the court of the beloved, again the beloved. Rub our heads in the dust and ask for justice. With this, they all set out back towards Rome. They just came from Rome, and now they're going back to Rome. They're going back west. There's not a moment to waste. 401 disciples don the garments of wayfaring and travel, and they head now back to Rome. There's also a patience in this, isn't there? It's a patience that I think for many of us, I'll be honest, for me, has been deeply tested during this unsettled and unsettling pandemic quarantine period. How quickly do our nerves fray with the people who we love and who are around us? How quickly do we start to unravel? How quickly do I get testy with those around me for no other reason than my own sense of frustration with myself, let alone anyone else? Friendship requires a certain patience, doesn't it? A steadfastness, a keeping faith to the tie that binds us to another person. And as they set out for Rome, they were absorbed in prayers. And for 40 days and 40 nights they prayed. They prayed all day and all night. And each one in his own way knocked 100,000 times on the Almighty's door. They denied themselves food, they denied themselves sleep, they denied themselves bread, they denied themselves water. Think about the parable. They went to the extremes of companionship. So much that they loved that they left everything, and they just made sure that every opportunity was dedicated to prayer for the sheikh that they loved so much, who had helped them so much, who had given them knowledge, who had guided them, and who now found himself in mortal difficulty. And then comes the answer. The supplication of this pure tribe, Atta writes, caused a frightful uproar in heaven, and green-clad angels from high and low donned garments of mourning, that even the angels were moved, by God's will, of course, to don garments of mourning at the level and the intensity of the love now that was being shown to the sheikh. At last, the prayers of the disciple who was purest of them hit the target, and this is the disciple who remained in Mecca. At dawn, a musk-laden breeze, and this is, we're about to experience something that is central to the Islamic spiritual tradition, which is this vision, and engagement with the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. At dawn, a musk-laden breeze wafted and unveiled a mysterious world to his heart. He saw the Prophet walking towards him like the moon, a braided black lock hanging over each shoulder. The almighty shadow was a sun on the Prophet's face. May 100 worlds of souls fall prostrate to a single strand of his hair. That the Prophet is so compelling that we would be brought low by the very experience of seeing him. He walked leisurely towards his disciple, and a smile graced his face, upon whom be peace. If you gazed at him, you would lose yourself and disappear. This is the blessing of Al-Habib, the beloved of the beloved, the Prophet Muhammad. In our tradition, it was the Prophet's smile and countenance that would move hearts and change hearts. And that whenever he sat with people, it was as every person felt that the Prophet was speaking to them. If you gazed at him, Attar writes, you'd lose yourself and disappear. The disciple jumped from his seat and took the Prophet's hand and beseeched him for help, pleading, "You are our leader, the world's lodestar from the celestial court. Help us, our sheikh has gone astray from the path. I beg you, please lend him your hand." And this, of course, in our tradition is known as asking for the intercession of the Prophet, upon whom be peace. That we know that God Almighty is the one who does, is the one who does, is the one who enacts. But we also know that the rank of prophethood is the rank of intercession. And how does the Prophet respond? "Noble soul, go. Your sheikh has been released from bondage. Your devotion and beseeching did its work. You did not falter until your sheikh was saved. For a long time, a dark haze lay between the sheikh and the truth. That has been lifted. That dusty haze has been lifted from the path, and he has been raised from the darkness. I have drawn dews from the healing ocean and sprinkled it on him, the healing of the prophetic presence. The mist has burned off, repentance has descended, and sin has perished. Know that 100 sins dissipate with a single repentance uttered by the mouth. When the ocean of benevolence surges," listen to the language, "when the oceans of benevolence surges, it washes away the misdeeds of every man and woman." This is the power of prayer. This is the power of asking for forgiveness, and this is the power of being granted it. Aren't we told again in our tradition? Aren't we told again and again in our tradition that if your sins were from the earth to the heavens, ask God for forgiveness and you will be forgiven, as if it was the foam on the ocean. Ask God for forgiveness and you will be forgiven. La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Why do you despair, ya ibadi, oh my servant? The Quran says, and Allah speaks in the Quran, says, "Oh my servant, ya ibadi." The same way that one would say, "Ya habibi, ya ibadi," the highest station that a human being can have with God. Ya ibadi, why do you despair of the mercy of God? La taqnatu min rahmatillah. This is exactly what the Prophet is conveying. The ocean of benevolence surges and it washes away the misdeeds. This is the power of transformation, that we have within us the capacity for transformation. We have within us the spiritual technology for transformation. We have within us the heart for transformation. And if we are able, through prayer and through reflection and through fikr, through deep introspection, to seek forgiveness and transformation, can we not also be a means for transformation in the world? At hearing this news, this disciple lost his consciousness, and when he came to, he shouted with such vigorous joy that it shook the rafters of heaven. He gave the disciples the good news, and they hurried They hurried towards Rum, carrying and running until they reached the swine-herding sheikh. They saw him ablaze like fire. They saw the nur upon him. Having regained his old vigor, he had shed the zonar and cast off the obligatory bells for swine-herding. When the sheikh saw his old disciples approaching from afar, he thought himself shockingly stripped of light. From shame, he rent his clothes to shreds, and they fell to the ground, shedding a storm of bitter tears, and he was tearing at his flesh. He was so overcome by embarrassment at what had happened. He was so overcome by a sense of regret of what had happened that his blood burned from grief. His sighs singed the curtains of heaven. Faith's wisdom and knowledge that had been washed away from his consciousness now flooded back. Do you think he ever felt faith like that before? I wonder if he ever felt faith like that before. I don't think he ever did. Because as we talked about last time, that in this story, it's the Christian woman who is the means through which the sheikh is tested. She is actually, in a way, that spiritual Khidr-like character who fundamentally challenges the faith of the sheikh. In the same way that Khidr alayhi salam, or the character that we call Khidr in the Quran, challenges Moses, Musa, through 3 distinct and shocking trials, really. In the same way, this personality of the Christian woman in this story challenges the sheikh. So he experiences faith now as he returns to it, having gone through that process, now returns to it in a different kind of way. And we'll see how he returns to it in just a moment as we come to the end of the story. He fell prostrate on the ground. Sweat and blood, tears of shame steeped him red as a rose. They said, "Fathomer of mysteries, clouds have lifted from the sun. Infidelity has absconded. Faith has come." This idolater of Rum, the sheikh, is once again a worshipper of one creator. Sheikh, the Almighty's ocean of acceptance has surged and washed away your indiscretions. Now is the time for thankfulness, not for such grief. Don't grieve. Don't grieve. What's happened has happened. The sins we have committed are the sins we have committed. The blessing and the virtue of maghfirah, of forgiveness, of tawbah, of turning to God, is that it brings on not grief but thankfulness. That we've had the ability to say these things, to enter into that state, to enter into the slipstream of divine transformation. Be obliged to your beloved God, who opened a glistening path across black tar. The beloved knows night from light and listens to remorse for such sins. When the fire of contrition is kindled, all that must burn will ignite. The fire of contrition. This is the cleansing fire. To make the story brief, Hoopoe, saying Attar's words, says, they readied themselves for the journey back to Mecca. The sheikh performed his ablutions and put on his cloak, and they started back towards the holy city. And now what of this Christian girl? And remember, we have to constantly keep in mind the time that Attar was living in, the position he was writing from. And one thing that came to me this week, and it was while I was listening to the Ramadan talks by Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. An important thing to remember about our tradition, particularly during this period that Attar is writing, just before the Mongol invasion, which is a period of incredible scholarship and incredible. The creation of an incredibly cosmopolitan society where commerce flourishes, but more than that, where arts and sciences, where the sacred sciences flourish. There's an incredible confidence about what it means to be Muslim. There's an incredible confidence about what it means to be a believer. There's an incredible confidence about what it means to have been given or to have been recipients of this great tradition, because they're living in a time where this tradition is alive. It's alive and it's robust, and there's people writing, and there's poetry, and there's story, and there's erudition, and there's scholarship, and there's civilization. So you can imagine that the way the other is spoken about, particularly in the literature of this time, it's spoken about from the perspective of great confidence. This is not the writing of a post-colonial. This is the writing of people who are in a civilization that is ascendant. Now the girl has a dream. The girl has a dream, and she sees the sun fall into her arms, and the glowing orb begins to speak. And what does it say to her in the dream? Go after the sheikh. Take on his faith and be as dust at his feet. You who sullied his face, now be his pure one. He adopted your way. Now, in all fairness, you must take on his. You waylaid him from his path, and now walk the path with him. You were his highway robber, now be his highway companion. So the girl wakes up from this dream, and remember, we know that she's a spiritual person. We know as well, and there's hints of this, that what she has done here is she's been a means by which the sheikh has been tested. In some ways, the story isn't about Christianity or Islam. This story is about what is the path that one takes that brings you closer to God. What is the path of transformation? And how is it that we all have to go through transformation? And what does that transformation look like? And now we come to a moment where this character in the story herself is also transformed. She wakes up from her dream, and the pain of longing for the sheikh takes hold of her inner being and unsettles her. In a way, she begins also to realize how much the sheikh sacrificed for her, how, in fact, pure and intense his love was. And how, while he may not have been true to his faith, he was true to love. He was true to love. And in being true to love, there is also something that is praiseworthy. It may have, there may be blameworthy things that come out of it. But at the kernel and at the heart of it, he honored love. He honored that love. She did not know what kind of seed had borne fruit in her impatient soul. Something had happened to her, and she had no one to confide in. Who could she tell now about what had happened? She suddenly found herself in a mysterious world, a world with no signposts, a world that left her mute because her tongue had no function there. Her arrogance and liveliness drained away from her like rain from a cloud. That now she is brought into that region that I think all of us go to from time to time, that place where we feel very alone, where we're feeling things in our heart and we can't share with anyone, where we're feeling maybe realizations and it's just us. She screamed and ran out, tearing at her garments, penitent and crying tears of despair. Her heart overflowed with grief, and she ran after the sheikh. But she did not know which way he had gone, and so she ran this way and that way. She needed to reconnect with the sheikh. She needed to go to him and to repair what had happened. Lost and feeble, she wailed long and loud, rubbed her face on the soil in despair, crying, "Skilled master, I don't know what to do. I waylaid a wayfarer of your path. Forgive me, for I did not know what I was doing. Calm the sea of your anger. I did what I did. I erred. Forgive me. Do not punish me for my deeds. I accept your path. Grant me your aid. I am dying and there's no one to help me. And my share of honor is nothing but abasement." She's overcome with the sense of what she's done to the sheikh. And in that process, her own sense of who God is has been shaken. She's now going through that door into a deeper understanding of God the Beloved. And this is where our story will soon come to a close. The sheikh is informed by a voice from within. The girl has become reacquainted with our faith and adopted our way. Return and reunite with your idol. Become her companion. Upon hearing this, the sheikh turned around like the wind, and again an agitation fell among his disciples. They said, "Sheikh, are you going again?" Can you imagine the scene? They're on their way to Mecca now. Everything is done. The Prophet's intercession has come, forgiveness, the taking of the cloak, and all of a sudden he's turning around and he's speaking about this woman again. "Sheikh, are you returning again?" they cried. "What was all that talk of regret? If you once again become her lover, your repentance will be nulled." But then the sheikh turns to them and said, "You don't know her condition. You don't know her sincerity. You don't know how this experience has also changed her, just as it has changed me." And as the disciples listened, they felt that their hearts melt. So once again, they went back. They went back towards Rome. And what happened? They found her on the path. Yellow as gold, hair covered with dust, barefoot. She was laid on the ground like a body empty of life. When she saw the sheikh, she said, "My soul burns from shame, and I cannot bear to live inside my blindness a single moment longer. I want to cast aside the veil of ignorance. Please teach me all about the path so I can start my journey." Of course, she could only know about the path or start her journey on the path if she'd already been on the path. Someone doesn't come to this point of deep introspection and transformation if they haven't been on the path already. But it's the humility of the person who's on the path to know that when they come to that point of transformation, they recognize that the place that they've been before is nothing compared to the place they could be. The sheikh's disciples looked on, full of excitement, as he stood next to her, stood by her, knelt down close to her, and taught her the ways of the path. When she saw the way and tasted the sweetness of seeing the path in her now wide-awake heart, she became impatient with excitement. She had a yearning which even the sheikh couldn't contain. And so she said, "Sheikh, my endurance has run out. I can't bear separation from what I now know." Isn't that amazing? She goes to the sheikh knowing that his love was pure, knowing that she was a means of testing him, knowing that they both have to move now forward on the path to God. But she has such a heart that now that she's tasted something of God's love and mercy and compassion and grace, she doesn't want to be separate from it. She says, "I cannot bear separation from what I now know. I can't bear separation from the source of beauty and compassion and mercy. I am leaving this troubled world of dust. I will no longer be able to speak. So forgive me and do not be angry." And she says, "By your leave, Sheikh of the world, farewell," because she's become part of the next world. And then she passes away. The moon face surrendered her last breath and offered up the half-life she still held to the beloved. The sun disappeared behind a cloud as her sweet life left her. She had been a drop of water in the sea of fantasy, but now she found her way to the true ocean. And now the Hoopoe Attar gives us a final word on this story. We all leave this world like a breeze. Depart it just as she did. Do you see how she now becomes the exemplar for us? She becomes the exemplar. We all leave this world like a breeze, departed just as she did. Many have suffered like this in the path of love. If you grasp love, you will grasp what I just said. The love that we have, we all know it. For us who have experienced love, human love, divine love, filial love, love for our friends, we know it. That love is a path which is a path of elation and of joy and of happiness, but it's also a path of pain. How many parents cry over things that their children do? Is it because they hate their kids? No, because we love our kids. We love our children. And when you love someone, you care so much about them. And if you're loved by someone that cares so much about you, if you grasp love, you will grasp what I just said. Whatever you can imagine is possible in the wayfarer's path, it is all compassion and despair, faith and faithlessness. The ego has no ear to hear such mysteries. This is not something you're going to understand intellectually. Comprehension is based on capacity, this capacity, the heart capacity. If it has not been ordained, you cannot grab your share. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expand the comprehension of our spiritual character so that we can understand what it is to really love, so we can understand what it is to wayfare on the path to the beloved. That we ask Allah to remove our ego and our arrogance so that we can experience the joy and the sweetness of love, but also the pain of love. Truth must be listened to by the heart and the soul, not by what is fabricated from water and clay. This water and clay, this substance which contains us, which holds us, this is just the physical stuff. Ar-ruhu min amri rabbi, the soul is an affair with God. This is that thing, that force that animates us is from the divine. That's how we understand things. The battle between the ego and the heart flares hotter by the hour. Wail, mourn, and lament the sorrow it brings. What is the Hoopoe telling us? The Hoopoe's telling us that we are constantly in a state of wayfaring, and we are constantly in a state of spiritual warfare. That we are battling our ego, our lower self, our greed, our avarice, our arrogance, our desire for things, our jealousy. It's battling the heart which wants us to be freed of these things so that we can be of service to others. So we can be amongst those who are a means by which divine mercy, beauty, grace, and compassion can flow into the world, a means by which justice can flow into the world. But that can't happen. You can't be the vessel for that unless the mirror of the heart is reflective, unless the ego has been removed. And this is what this entire story is about. The entire story is about the edification of the heart and the spiritual self and good character and good actions so that we can become those individuals who, when they meet the Simorg, the great teacher, can know that is the Simorg and is the great teacher, and who knows that when we approach the beloved, that we are ready to meet the beloved and that we have not created barriers because the beloved was never absent from us. The beloved was never absent from us. And so at this point in the story of Sheikh Saran ends. And right after this, the birds begin their journey. And they formally elect the Hoopoe, who's already their leader and already their guide. They elect the Simorg they elect the Hoopoe, as their leader to go to the Simorg. The birds are so moved by the story. Why did the Hoopoe tell the story? And then we'll move to the conclusion. Why did the Hoopoe tell the story? Well, it's a story of love. It's a story of wayfaring. But why did he tell them all this story in the context of the journey? Because ultimately, this story for me is about sohbah. It's about companionship and it's about friendship. At the heart of this is that prophetic advice to us. You are on the faith of those who you befriend. Who are our friends? Who do we want to journey along this path with? Who are those who we are going to see and they're going to see us through the most difficult moments, the most outrageous moments, the moments that'll tear us apart? Who's going to stand there with us? That's the kind of friendship that's required on this path. To build relationships with one another, to be good with each other, to give gifts, to serve one another. All of this advice that we're given constantly, This is not advice that's given to us in vain. It's not light advice. This is heavy advice. The work of building community is difficult work. My friends at the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton know that. Sajid Bhai and Imam Mendez and all the wonderful people, Faria and others who work in this community, you all know that. Anyone who's lived in community knows that. You know how difficult it is to build community. You know how difficult it is to maintain friendship. This story, I think, is told at this moment. It has many lessons, but it's told because of friendship, because of sohbat, because we all need companions on the path. We all need companions on this path. And this story is so vital to me because, in a way, it sort of gives us a sense of what is to come. And if you'll allow me, in this last sort of 10 or minutes or so that we have, I wanna give us a sense of where the story goes. I hope all of you will read The Conference of the Birds. It's I would say it's a sort of a perfect reading for Ramadan, particularly the end of Ramadan. Every page is filled with stories and advice that the Hoopoe tells. And, you know, it's remarkable because in many ways, this book is one step forward, two steps back. There's moments where the journey is looking good and things are flowing. And then complaints come and boasts come. And so the Hoopoe has to deal with weakness and sinfulness, ambivalence, wanton ego, pride, greed, grandiosity. Yes, the Hoopoe has to deal with this amongst his companions. And then the birds have questions. They want to know, well, who is God? Like, who is the beloved? How do we understand the beloved? And so there are story after story. And then the birds get fearful again after they realize that they are still bogged down by their poor character. There's a great little story which I hope you'll allow me to read, and then we'll move to the end of the session. It's the parable of a man and his beard. This is very relevant for me right now because I have a quarantine beard, which is slightly out of control. It's behaving itself a little bit tonight, although the edges of it are flying off in all kinds of unusual ways. And I'm very precious about my beard, which is why I don't trim it myself, in case you were asking yourself that question. In the section where the birds ask about the beloved, the Hoopoe tells the story of a man and his beard, and I want to share it with you. In the time of Moses, there was a devout fellow who spent his days and nights in prayer. Yet despite his devotion, he found no pleasure or improvement in his being, and neither did the great sun rise in his heart. His only possession in this world was a long, fine beard, which he often combed with great care. One day he spotted Moses from afar and ran to him and said, "Sinai's supreme commander, for pity's sake, ask the Almighty why, despite all my devotion, I have found no spiritual ecstasy." When Moses went up to Mount Sinai, he asked about the devout man, and the Great One, God, replied, "Tell the fellow the reason he has not been able to attain my presence is that he is more preoccupied with his own beard than with his beloved." Moses came back down and related the Almighty's message to the poor devout. Upon hearing this, the man began to wail and yank at his beard. The angel Gabriel came down and told Moses, "Look at him. He's still busy with his beard. Whether he's trimming it or yanking it out, it's all the same. It's all about his beard." It's an amazing story. Whether you're righteous or you're a crook, says the Hoopoe, whether you're righteous or a crook, if you take a single breath unmindful of the beloved, you have stumbled. You who are preoccupied, either loving or fretting about your beard, first free yourself of that burden. Then enter the great ocean. For if you fall into its water with your beard intact, it will drag you down and you'll drown. My friends, none of this work is about the externals. None of this is about the externals. This is what Attar is reminding us constantly in this book. It's not about the external things. It's not. Those are just means. Those are forms that have to be animated by intention and presence and heart and being. What's our prayer if it's just words? What's our fasting if it's just restricting ourselves from food and drink? What is our giving zakat if it's just divesting ourselves of income? No, we have to animate, and this is what Attar is reminding us in this book constantly. That we often become extreme in either leaving the form or taking on the form. The form is just the form. The form is just the means. It's just the way. It's just the vehicle. Animate that. Brothers and sisters, friends from many traditions who've joined us, eventually the birds journey through the 7 valleys, which we've spoken about in previous weeks, and there isn't time to go through them. But each valley is given an incredible explanation. The valley of quest, the valley of love, the valley of annihilation, the valley of knowledge, the valley of death. All of these valleys the birds get through, and they're difficult. So that the thousands of birds, because there were thousands of birds who began this journey, when they arrive at the gate of the Simorg, when they finally arrive at the gate of the Simorg, there's only 30 of them left. Many have passed. Many have passed by the wayside. And so, what does Attar say in conclusion? 30 bodies without wings or feathers arrived feeble and sore. Hearts shattered, soul surrenders, bodies broken. Before them was an indescribable majesty beyond all reason, past comprehension. It thundered and flashed, and self-sufficiency, and with each dispatch burned 100,000 worlds. That majesty was like myriad suns, multiple rooms, and more. As the birds looked on in awe, they saw how they all were atoms dancing in that whirlwind. They've now become divested of themselves. They're seeing the truth of the world around them, and they see that it's animated by God's majesty, and they see them as just contingent on God in this great majesty of creation. In this great majesty of creation. And finally, they come to the herald, and they tell the herald that they've come to find the Simorg. And the herald asks them, "Greetings, birds. Where do you come from? Why have you come here? What are your names? You good-for-nothing bunch." He's tough. "Where do you call home? Who speaks for you? You're weak. What do you want here?" The birds reply, "We have come here to make the great Simorg our sovereign. We are all lovers for that beloved and have surrendered our hearts and all repose in the path. We have been journeying here a long while. We were thousands, but now only 30 of us have survived. We have come a long way, hoping to attain the presence of the sublime Simorg. Will the Great One accept us and pity our suffering? Will he grant us an audience out of his kindness?" And the response comes. The response is tough. It's a tough response. They've been through a lot. The herald replies, "Bewildered birds. The beloved is the eternal ruler." This is a very interesting point. The herald is reminding the birds that the real ruler, the real great one, is the beloved, God. "Bewildered birds, that beloved is the eternal ruler, whether you exist in the world or not. 100,000 worlds brimming with troops are but a single line of ants at the Almighty's door. You come to this door, what do you offer? But blood and pus, weaklings. Return from wherever you came from." The herald is giving some final tough love. The final tough love. But then, my friend, something remarkable happens. Something remarkable happens. Shamed and mortified, the souls of the birds turned repentant and became ash. In this repentance, they purified themselves, and what they had been, the Spirit of the Almighty shined and bestowed upon them new spirits. They found in themselves new lives and once again became amazed. What they had and had not committed in the past was wiped away, erased from their breasts. The sun of proximity poured its rays on them and endowed them with new life. And then they saw the face of the Simorg. They saw the face of the Simorg, but in a reflection. And when they looked closer, they saw the reflection was their own. Simorg, which means 30 birds. They were startled, they were amazed, and still more astonished, they saw how they themselves were the great Simorg. All along, Simorg was in fact 30 morg birds. When they looked at the Simorg was where they themselves stood. And when they looked at themselves, they saw Simorg standing there too. And when they looked at both were one and the very same in every way. The Simorg was them and they were the Simorg. Have you ever heard such a thing? Attar asks. Bewildered, bereft of reason, and steeped in the thought, they could fathom nothing because they stood in a state of absolute nothingness. Wordlessly, they asked the Beloved to unveil the mighty secret. Relieve them of the confusion of this of identities, this you and us and you. What they realized was in this final moment was whether there was 30 of them or 1,000 of them. And this is the answer that comes. Wordlessly, the answer came. A mirror is the Beloved's sun-like face. Look into it and see both body and soul, yourself, soul and body, you. You have arrived as 30 birds, and in the mirror you see 30 birds. Had you come as 40 or 50, you'd see in the mirror 40 or 50. Though you've come in great number, you still see yourself. You will always see yourself. And, you know, in studying this, and it's a remarkable sort of conclusion, a kind of remarkable climax of the story. In a way, I think that Attar is saying to us, through the process of wayfaring, that great force which unites us, that great force that guides us, it's with us. God has given you and I the capacity, the raw materials, and we need the Hoopoe, and we need the disciple of Sheikh Sanan, and we need our friends, and we need those who are beloved to us, and we need our parents and our children. We need our community to be a community that is traveling to God, that is doing sacred, ethical, moral, righteous, just, good work for all while life is with us. But we don't need to find the Simorg. We together are the Simorg. The closer you and I together come to finding the true purpose of our creation in our heart, we will find amongst us the Simorg grow, the spiritual leadership that we all require, we will find in community and with each other. We are the ones we have been looking for, as the indigenous saying goes. We are the ones we have been waiting for. That you and I together on this path, with the help of guides, with the help of beautiful people who will push us, who will challenge us, who will help us transform, that we have the capacity for transformation. Because God has never been absent. Because God has never been absent. When was God absent? When did we need the Simorg to take us to God? When he's closer to us than our jugular vein. We are tested. We are tested indeed. The path is a path of test. The path is a path of test. There's no doubt about that. What do you know of what lies ahead, Attar says? Come to yourself, reflect deeply on this. Not until your life is rejected by the divine can you find acceptance in the Almighty's court. Not until you've experienced the separation. Not until you've experienced what happens through sinfulness. Not until you've experienced falling down will you find acceptance. Not until you learn humility can you attain everlasting life. That's what the story is about. To me, that's what the story is about, and that's the way those who have read it have found it. There's a beautiful epilogue to the book where Attar speaks to himself and now speaks in his own voice, and it's remarkable, you know. He speaks about all these stories as well. There's a beautiful moment in these final words where he speaks about the stories and the parables, and that he's written so many of these stories and parables, and why has he done it, and why has he done these fancy poetic tales. He said, "Wayfarer, do not come to this book for fancy poetic tales. See it through the eyes of suffering to understand an iota of my longing. Do that and you've scored the goal," he says. My dear brothers and my dear sisters, my friends, I am so honored, so pleased that we've been able to spend this time together. It's a remarkable book, and I hope each of you is able to read it. I hope each of you is able to enjoy it. And if I can just leave you on this as we approach iftar time, at least here in New Haven, Connecticut, you know, this book is like all the books of our tradition, the books of wayfaring. It's a book that teaches us. It teaches us that the path is going to be difficult. It teaches us that falling down is part of the path. It's a book that has contained within it incredible mercy and compassion for the human condition, but also shows us the possibilities of the human condition, and shows us the possibilities of what it means to love, and what love can do, and how love can transform us, and that we need love above all else. We need God's love, and if we want to have that love from God Almighty, if we want to experience divine love, then we must show love to others and experience love from others. We must serve others. My own spiritual teachers would say that their way was that even when they found people in difficulty, they would go to that place of difficulty. They would sit with them. You know, as one of my teachers said, that they would stand outside they might not go into the tavern. They might not go into the tavern, but they'll stand outside the tavern. And when those who have done with the tavern come out, they'll be there for them. And they won't look on them with the eye of judgment, but they'll look on with the eye of friendship and the eye of mercy. Because as Attar reminds us, one day we think we have it all together. One day we think we got all of our stuff together. We think we're on the path. We think we're going to God. We think everything's happening the way it should. Everything's unfolding the way it should. Allah is giving us so many successes the way we think we deserve. And then we hit that snag in the road. Something happens. We meet that person. We meet that situation. We meet that moment. We meet that challenge. And just like Sheikh Sanan, we're gone. We're lost. What then? What then? If we've been mean to others, arrogant with others, dismissive of others, who's going to stand with us? Who's going to be the one who's going to knock on the Almighty's door for us? That's why friendship is so important. That's why being on this path is so important. That's what the hard work is. And I say that to myself, first of all. There's nothing about this which is easy. God didn't say it was going to be easy. But along the way, there's joys. And there's joys in love and in friendship. There's joys in companionship. There's joys on this path. There's joys in solitude. There's joys in company. We're learning all that now. Allah's teaching us all of that now. And there's a joy in service, but never count on our service. That's what I was always told. Never count on the actions that you're doing. Just do them. Just do them. Don't count on them. Just do them because you have to. So we see injustice in the world. We go after that injustice. knowing that our actions may not cause that injustice to be rectified or ameliorated. This is for us this is the challenge to us, my friends. And so I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me over these last few weeks, for putting up with me, and my long histrionics, I'm sure. Thank you for being here. Please buy the book, read the book, enjoy it, be bewildered by it, be angered by it. These texts are not meant to be easy texts. They're texts that challenge us and that force us into the realm of allegory and that force us into the realm of interpretation, because that's the human condition. We're trying to figure it out. So let's figure it out together, inshallah. Time is limited. I know iftar time is coming. I know you guys have to go. I just want to say a big thank you to Sajid Bhai, to Yusuf, to Sheikh Mendez, to the Muslim Center for Greater Princeton for allowing me this opportunity to be with you, for creating this beautiful space that we can be together in. And like I said, thank you very much. I've put my details before on the chat. I'll do it again. Please feel free to stay in touch. And I'm hoping that inshallah, when things are, I don't even know what normal is anymore, but I think when time comes and we're able to visit one another, I look forward to visiting the community in Greater Princeton and to remaining in touch with all of you, inshallah. My final dua is that I hope in these last 10 nights you find great openings, great joy. I hope you all find love. I hope you all find companionship with God. I hope all of you experience the night of power. I hope that this time is a time of forgiveness for us, and ultimately we know that this is a time of liberation from the fire. And in this liberation from the fire, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to liberate us from the fire, and to liberate us from the fires of the human condition as much as from the fires that are eternal, from the fires of oppression and difficulty. Ya Allah. Jazakallah khairan, everybody. And Sajid Bhai, thank you so much for your patience with me.